Hi guys, welcome back to another video, or your first video here, I don't know. Welcome if you're new here, welcome either way. This is going to be a bit different from my usual content, and that is, as you can probably see from the video title, is talking about the Audible situation and alternatives that I have used, and just so people can make more educated choices. Now, far better booktubers with far greater platforms than I have been covering this, so I really encourage you to go check out their videos. A couple of videos, especially Daniel Green's ones, will be in the description, so please do go out and look at these things. So as far as I can understand, Audible have had a scandal where they've been kind of screwing over authors. This is not the first time this has happened. I know that there's been an issue with their returns policy. That scandal I know very little about, so please look for other sources. The current problem started a couple of years ago when people found in their fine print that when someone puts an audiobook onto Audible and that is purchased by a consumer, the author or the owner of the audiobook gets 40% of that sale and Audible gets 60% of that sale, which is wild, especially when in other platforms and in other cases where you're selling something that has a like someone will only experience online, like a video game, for example, the owner will get 70% of every sale. And that got even worse when you looked at Audible's, okay, well, you could exclusively go through us, so you are not allowed to put your audiobooks on any other platform, and you will get 40%. And if you don't exclusively go through us, we will only give you 25% of a sale. So every time you spent one credit or you spent money on a sale, only 25% of that was actually going to the author. A lot of people made a big stink about it. I think Brandon Sanderson did a big stunt where he essentially refused to publish some of his upcoming work on Audible until they agreed to pay authors better and in a timely fashion, because they used to pay people in like 3-month batches rather than every month, which is how you normally get paid. But how they've gone about this, I think, is very underhanded, and I know that a lot of bigger YouTubers who already work with Audible as a sponsor of their channel feel like they can't, or if they already have a big book deal, they feel like they can't talk about the situation. So what they are doing now is they've said, okay, we're going to pay you better. Here's a contract, please sign it. And in the fine print, or just described really strangely to just muddy the waters. Now, this is going to take some explaining, so hopefully I can do this right. Audible want to change from being a you purchase a product company or site to a streaming site, so Netflix but for audiobooks. And they don't want to have to pay the rights to be able to loan people things. So like they call it their Plus Catalogue, where you can essentially loan as many things as you want and read as many things as you want per month with paying a one fixed fee, but you don't own any of the content. You don't, like, if the author, for example, decides to remove what they want from the Plus Catalogue, you no longer have access to it despite paying for the service. So that is fine, but this is where the sneakiness comes in. They are also still going to have their credit-based system where you get a credit or a number of credits per month that you pay for, and with that credit you can spend it on the titles that are offered for credits that aren't in their Plus catalogue. But what Audible are now saying is that if you buy a book and you pay an amount of money or a credit which is worth an amount of money, and you listen to stuff in their Plus catalogue, Audible are going to be taking money away from the author of your audiobook that you paid for to pay the people in the Plus catalogue. And they've been giving super weird excuses, like, this is what consumers want, this is what author, like, if I'm purchasing something, one, I want them to be getting more than 25%. But two, I'm assuming that all of the money from my purchase of them is then actually going to that author. So, I mean, Audible are in control with the vast majority of the audiobook market. They have, like, they're so big at this point that they control so much about, I mean, all book consumption, but especially audiobooks, where a lot of other audiobook companies are still using some of Audible's platform or content that is also published or produced for Audible. Also, the fact that in this Plus catalogue, there are going to be titles in there that Audible own and have produced. So are Audible going to be stealing money from these independent authors, for example? It's just really, really underhanded, really shady, really hard to get away from. I am wondering whether or not to, once I've used all of my Audible credits, to cancel my account and just have the Audible audiobooks that I've already purchased be on my account that I can use. Unless they really turn this around, I really don't know how I'm going to continue using their platform, but I really do hope that they can change it around. The second big issue in this is that who goes on the Audible Plus catalogue is entirely controlled by Audible, and they've said, oh yes, we're keeping this really locked down. There's going to be a really select number of authors who can go. Well, first of all, you're creating an in-group and an us versus them mentality. Second of all, does it mean that people who speak up against Audible and the bad things they're doing, do they automatically get excluded from being able to be approved for this Plus category status? And they've repeatedly said, we're going to keep it small, we're going to keep it data-driven, blah, blah, blah. However, when somebody publishes through KDP, which is Amazon or Kindle's own ebook publishing service, which I have actually used. There was a family project of poetry that I put together and published through KDP. If you use Audible's own AI generative audiobook service, so you write what you want, you publish it on KDP, and within 15 minutes you click a button and it generates an audiobook for you. To publish that audiobook, it automatically gets added to the Plus catalogue. So then you haven't got this only people in the in-group, it's going to remain really small, so the sale siphoning is going to be really minimal and people won't even notice, to, I don't know, like however many audiobooks flooding onto that service, and people trying out a bunch of things and then realizing either, oh, it's an AI voice and I really struggle with listening to that, or oh, it's not something that I want to continue with, I don't like the plot, or, and depending on how much of that you listen to, maybe it's even as small as half an hour just to get a feel for it, that could be counted as listening to the audiobook and be taking away from that author that you paid for their book. So it's all really underhanded, really, really strange, and I think it's really disgraceful what they're doing. Now, there is a petition going around offering up very, very simple solutions to Audible to be like, well, now the public has spoken. We don't want what you're doing. We don't want you to screw over these authors. We want you to pay them correctly and not be siphoning off their pay to pay other authors. Like, anyway, I really encourage you, please, 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 go sign that petition and really share what Audible are doing, because it's awful. In the second half of this video, I'm going to tell you the other places that I get and listen to audiobooks So please do give other things a try. So the first one, which is pretty easy, is just here on YouTube. So people have been known to put up full-length or audiobooks that are chopped into pieces into videos. Now, the thing to be mindful of with that approach is that sometimes this can be stolen content. Sometimes it can be that someone is making money off publishing something that isn't theirs. So there's a couple of things to look for. One is the author of the audiobook, also the channel owner. For example, Daniel Green has put, I think, 2 of his books up on YouTube. He is the author, so the listens will turn into sales for him through YouTube views, or YouTube ads, probably. Also, again, with the AI generative stuff, a lot of books I found on YouTube have been read by generative AI and haven't been very good in my experience. Also, I would much rather a human narrator get paid for their work. Another thing that is sort of a good sign is if someone is reading the book, so it's not an officially made audiobook, but it is a book out of the public domain. Public domain? In the public... Out of copyright. I can't remember the official word for it. Something that is old enough to be out of copyright is a really good sign. An example that I really love is the YouTube channel A Bit Late. She reads fairy tales mostly, but has done a couple of full-length novels. My personal favourites have been The Turn of the Screw and Ichabod Crane. So do check out her videos. But yes, if someone is reading something that is out of copyright onto YouTube, that is a way that you can consume audiobooks. The next way, although I do this less, is through physically purchasing audio CDs. Now, I used to do this far more when these were sold in places like The Works, for example, in the UK. I don't know what would be the equivalent in America, but essentially they do have their own branded things, but I would assume that a lot of them is sort of dead stock of other avenues. So they tend to be a lot cheaper than your usual shops. And they don't just sell books, they sell books, games, puzzles, art supplies, just... I think they were trying to fill in that Woolworths gap when that shop went out of business. But they used to sell audiobook CDs, and when I was first getting into audiobooks and I was first sort of noticing where they were, that is where I decided to purchase them because they were very reasonably priced. They were never books that I'd ever heard of, but it was something that when I was getting into it. Now they don't sell them anymore, and mostly if I'm seeing audiobook CDs, they're in big named shops like Waterstones, I'm assuming Barnes & Noble in the US, and those are extremely expensive, which I can get why. You want to be able to pay the people for their work, but if it's something that you can't afford, also charity shops sometimes have audiobook CDs in them. So there are a couple of places where you can get physical CDs. Also, not everyone has a CD player. I purchase them less because I do have a CD player, but it's less convenient. I'm listening on my phone a lot more, or in car journeys. Again, I can just plug in my phone, so it's very rare that I'm putting in a CD. Also, there is the danger with a charity shop CD. There might be CDs missing if you go to one that they don't check these things, or it might be scratched or damaged, and then you've got like a little piece of the audiobook that you're missing, which isn't fun when you're trying to piece together what's happening. But if you do want alternatives, those are 2 you can use. So the rest of my suggestions are other apps you can use. So they have, I would say, the same level of convenience as an Audible app. So the first one is iBooks. They are Apple's own book app. Google Books, or however Google present that, probably do as well. But that is another place where you can listen to audiobooks. Everand/Scribd is a really interesting one. So it used to be Scribd, now they've kind of done a rebrand. They were doing a lot of different things, and they essentially split what they were doing and called them 2 separate things. So you can still have the Scribd account/app, but that is more to do with documents and magazines and things. So I've pretty much abandoned that one. The second one is Everand. They have, over time, switched up how they're operating as well, and I think it has pros and cons, but I still think the pros outweigh the cons. So, Everand used to be an audiobook streaming service, kind of like what Audible is trying to create. So you paid a flat monthly fee and you could listen to unlimited audiobooks. However, it wasn't unlimited, and I think that the lack of transparency was what really annoyed people, hence why they've decided to change. I found that after I listened to a couple of books or read a couple of ebooks on their site, there would be things that would disappear from my saved library. It wouldn't disappear forever, it would go into like a little other tab where it would say, this will be available on this date. And that date would be when the next payment would come in. And I was like, okay, well, clearly they're not advertising that it's unlimited. Maybe if you do hit a certain number, and because I read a lot, I'm just hitting that number. But then I started to keep track of it, and it would change every month as to how many ebooks, how many audiobooks I would read/listen to, when it would start cutting things out of my to-read list. And it was often the same ones that got cut out. So the more I would listen, even after things were starting to disappear, the more would disappear. And what I worked out, and again, it was the transparency issue that I think turned a lot of people off and made me kind of about the platform, was that all the audiobooks still had a price attached to them. To make them easier, just in this analogy, I'm going to say that an author could sell an audiobook for between 1 and 10 credits. And let's say I, as a listener, pay for 10 credits per month. Now, I can spend those 10 credits however I want. I could spend it on 10 books worth 1 credit. Or I could buy 1 book worth 10 credits. And so I could do that. And I think that system would explain why I was listening to different numbers of books, and in some cases I'd only have to read 1 or 2 for a bunch of other stuff to become unavailable in my saved library. I would have much rather been made aware of how many credits I had and the price of the audiobooks, and whether or not they turned that into money or into a credit-based system. I don't mind, but I would have wanted that. So that is why they started to change their platform into a purchase and sale model. Now, with my monthly subscription, I can choose a subscription plan to get 1 or 2, for example, books/audiobooks on their platform, and I unlock them by using a credit, and that is then in my library, and regardless of anything else in my library that I happen to read, that stays in my library. I can see where they're coming from. I can see how this is far more a transparent system, which I think is a positive. The negative, and this may not be a negative for you, but for me, I read far more than 1 book a month. So I am then having to look at other platforms to get the normal amount of reading that I would do in a month. So if you only listen to like a book a month, or you only read a book a month, you may not even notice the change. So pros and cons, but another alternative for you to look at. So the next app, and I am sure there are more, but this is just the most famous one, is Libro FM. So that is a audiobook app where some of the money from your subscription or your sales goes to support independent bookshops. Now, because this is primarily, I believe, an American company, the bookshop that I choose to support when I listen through this app is Gay Pride Shop, because I was struggling to find one in the UK. But especially if you're in America, you can look up maybe your independent bookshop and be directly supporting them with your audiobook purchases. And the last 2 apps are BorrowBox and Libby. Depending on where you are, which app you will use will change, but my local one is Borrowbox. So essentially, they are a library-based service, so I can go to my local library and I can see what audiobook service they are subscribed to, and ebooks as well. And my local library subscribes to Borrowbox. So I make an account using my library card, and very similar rules apply to Borrowbox and just going to the library. I can look through their audiobook catalogue. I can save things to my want to read, and if something is available in the library, doesn't have to be in the physical library, available in the online library, I can borrow it or reserve it if it's not available, and that book is now on loan to me for an amount of time. I can renew that if I don't finish it. I can send it back early if I decide not to read it, but it essentially works as a library service on your phone. The library will have a number of copies of this book, so the number of people who can be borrowing that book at the same time, and if more than that number of people are borrowing it, then it's listed as on loan, and that's when, if I really wanted to read a book, I could then reserve it, and then when it becomes available again, I can then take it out on loan. So those are some of the main ways that I listen to audiobooks. There are a couple of others. There are a number of other websites where you can buy directly from authors or bookshops that will essentially send you the files either through an app or just literally just sending you the files. There are alternatives to Audible, and I would highly encourage you to check them out, see if they work for you, and also to spread the word about what Audible is doing. And please go sign that petition. Bye.